The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across nearly a mile of floating platforms and crystal walkways. 400 species had sent their representatives to this place, beings of every shape and size imaginable. Some floated in tanks of liquid methane. Others existed as clouds of living gas contained within magnetic fields. A few were so ancient that they had forgotten what their original forms had looked like. Today, they had all gathered to witness an execution. Ambassador Zeltrix of the Vorathi Dominion stood at the central podium, his insectoid body clicking with barely contained satisfaction. The Vorathi were conquerors by nature and by choice. They had ruled their section of the galaxy for 10,000 years, crushing any species that dared to resist their demands. Their exoskeletons were black as the void between stars, and their compound eyes reflected no warmth or mercy. Honored members of the council, Zeltrix began, his translator converting his clicks and hisses into the common tongue. I come before you today to announce a correction action against the species known as humans. A holographic display flickered to life above the podium. It showed a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in an unfashionable arm of the galaxy. The planet was beautiful in its way, covered in oceans and clouds and patches of green land. The humans have refused our generous terms of surrender, Zeltrix continued. They have rejected our offer to become a client species under Vorathi protection. They have, in their ignorance and pride, chosen to resist. High Counselor Mirathex leaned forward on her platform. She was ancient beyond measure, her crystalline body having grown slowly over millions of years. Light refracted through her form in patterns that conveyed her emotions to those who knew how to read them. Right now, those patterns showed concern. Ambassador Zeltrix, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The humans are a young species. They have only possessed faster-than-light travel for 40 of their years. Surely a diplomatic solution could be found. What could they possibly have done to warrant military action? Zeltrix's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. They exist in space that the Dominion requires. Their star system sits at the junction of 3 major trade routes. We offered them the choice to serve us willingly. They refused. Now they will serve us regardless. The display changed, showing a massive fleet of warships moving through space toward the blue planet. The ships were dark and angular, bristling with weapons. Even through the hologram, the council members could sense the deadly power they represented. 3,200 warships, Zeltrix announced proudly. The largest fleet assembled in 2 centuries. We broadcast this event to the council as a courtesy, so that all may witness the consequences of defying the Vorathi Dominion. In the viewing gallery above the main chamber, representatives from dozens of smaller species watched the display with expressions of pity and resignation. The Veluxi delegate, a tall being covered in soft blue feathers, turned to his companion with a sad shake of his head. Another young species crushed before they could mature, he said quietly. It happens every century or so. Some new civilization discovers faster-than-light travel, ventures out into the galaxy full of hope and wonder, and runs into something bigger and meaner than themselves. The universe is not kind to the innocent. His companion, a Threllian with 6 arms and skin like flowing mercury, nodded in agreement. I reviewed the intelligence reports on these humans. They have a single small colony on the 4th planet of their system. Their entire military fleet consists of perhaps 200 vessels, most of them converted cargo ships and mining platforms. They have no planetary shields, no orbital defense stations, no weapons capable of threatening a Vorathi cruiser. Then why are we watching? The Veluxi asked. The Thrallian shrugged with 3 of her arms. Because the Vorathi want an audience for their cruelty. They want every young species in the galaxy to see what happens when you say no to them. Fear is their greatest weapon. Down in the main chamber, another council member had risen to speak. The Kelori ambassador was a massive being, her body covered in thick plates of natural armor. Her species had fought the Varathi centuries ago and lost badly. They still bore the scars of that defeat. "Ambassador Zeltrix," she said, her voice heavy with old anger, "is this display truly necessary? The humans pose no threat to anyone. They are barely more than children taking their first steps into the cosmos. Could you not simply leave them alone?" Zeltrix turned his compound eyes toward her, and something cold and cruel glittered in their depths. "Ambassador Krell, your species once asked us that same question. You begged us for mercy. You pleaded for us to spare your worlds. Do you remember what we answered?" The Kelori's armored plates shifted in what might have been shame or rage. "I remember. Then you know that the Varathi do not show mercy. Mercy is weakness. Mercy invites resistance. Mercy costs us more in the long run than simple, overwhelming force." Zeltrix gestured toward the display, where the fleet had begun to enter the human solar system. "In 3 standard rotations, Earth will be a conquered world. Its people will serve the Dominion, or they will die. There is no third option." High Counselor Mirathex watched the display with ancient eyes that had seen countless civilizations rise and fall. She had witnessed the birth of empires and the death of stars. She had seen species that had seemed eternal crumble into dust, and memory. Something about this felt different, though she could not say why. "Very well, Ambassador," she said finally. "The Council will bear witness, as is our tradition. May the outcome bring wisdom to all who observe." Zeltrix bowed with mock politeness. "The outcome will bring fear, High Counselor. Fear and submission. That is all the wisdom the galaxy needs." The broadcast began. Across 1,000 worlds, billions of beings turned their attention to the small blue planet called Earth, most expected to witness a quick and brutal conquest. Some hoped for a miracle, but did not truly believe one would come. None of them, not even the oldest and wisest among them, had any idea what they were about to see. The Varathi fleet entered Earth's orbit, weapons charging, troops preparing for the ground assault. They expected primitive resistance at best, immediate surrender at most likely. They did not expect what came next. No one did, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Admiral Kevin Lawson stood on the bridge of the carrier Endeavour, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the tactical display. Red markers filled the screen like a swarm of angry hornets, each one representing a Varathi warship. There were so many of them that the display had to zoom out twice just to fit them all. He was 57 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. He had fought in the water wars of 2089, when nations had killed each other over the last clean rivers. He had led the assault on the Mars rebels when the colonists there had tried to break away from Earth. He had never lost a battle he intended to win. Today would be the greatest test of his life. Commander Patricia Dunn stood beside him, reading the incoming data in a calm, steady voice. She was 43, tall and lean, with dark skin and a shaved head. She had been his second in command for 8 years, and he trusted her more than he trusted himself. 3,200 confirmed hostile vessels, she reported. Their lead elements will reach orbit in approximately 4 hours. Estimated combined firepower exceeds our entire defensive network by a factor of 53. What about our fleet? Lawson asked. 182 combat-capable vessels. Another 64 civilian ships that have been armed with whatever we could find. 12 orbital defense platforms, all operational. She paused. Sir, by any reasonable calculation, we cannot win this fight. Lawson nodded slowly. Good thing we stopped being reasonable 40 years ago. He turned to face his bridge crew. These men and women had trained their entire lives for a moment they had hoped would never come. Every human who had ever served in the Space Force knew the truth that the politicians never spoke aloud. Humanity was small and weak compared to the powers that ruled the galaxy. Someday, something would come to take what they had built. That day had arrived. "Open a channel," Lawson ordered. Every ship in the fleet, every ground installation, every militia unit on the planet. I want everyone to hear this. Lieutenant Danny Reeves, a young man barely out of training, worked his console with shaking fingers. "Channel open, Admiral." Lawson took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Lawson. By now, you have all seen the tactical situation. The Vorathi Dominion has decided that humanity should kneel. They have 3,000 warships. We have less than 200 military vessels. They have weapons that can crack a planet open like an egg. We have whatever we could build, borrow, or steal over the past 4 decades. He paused, letting his words sink in. They think this will be easy. They have studied our technology and found it primitive. They have counted our ships and found them few. They have examined our history and seen a species that spends most of its time fighting itself. A cold smile crossed his face. They have made a terrible mistake. They have not studied us. They do not know what we are. They do not understand what humanity does when something threatens our home. On 100 ships and 1,000 ground installations, men and women listened to their admiral's voice. Soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots ran final diagnostics on their fighters. Civilians who had never held a gun in their lives picked up rifles and prepared to defend their streets. 40 years ago, Lawson continued, when we first learned that we were not alone in the universe, we also learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place. We learned that there were species out there that conquered and killed without mercy or reason. And we made a decision. We would never be victims. We would never kneel. We would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Patricia handed him a data pad. He glanced at it and nodded. All units, execute Operation Pandora. May God have mercy on our enemies, because we will not. The channel closed. Across the solar system, humanity went to war. In the Galactic Council chamber, the observers noted the human ships beginning to move. They were spreading out, taking positions throughout the asteroid belt and around the moons of the outer planets. It looked like they were trying to establish a defensive perimeter, but the position made no tactical sense. The Veluxy delegate shook his feathered head. They could surrender now and save millions of lives. Their admiral must know that this is hopeless. Pride is such a wasteful emotion. The Threllian beside him did not respond. She was watching the display with an expression that might have been curiosity. The first Vorathi ships entered the inner solar system, moving with the casual confidence of predators who knew they had no natural enemies. Their commanders had reviewed the intelligence on human military capabilities and found nothing concerning. Primitive nuclear weapons, basic energy shields, slow, clumsy ships with inadequate armor. This would be the easiest. Conquest in living memory. Then the mines began to detonate. They had been there for 20 years, drifting silently among the asteroids and debris clouds. 200,000 of them, each one packed with enough nuclear material to vaporize a city. The humans had built them in secret, launched them from hidden facilities, and programmed them to wait. The first wave of Vorathi ships vanished in a chain reaction of nuclear fire that lit up the solar system like a second sun. In the council chamber, Ambassador Zeltrix rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking in shock. What is this? What is happening? The display showed 400 Vorathi ships gone in the first 10 seconds. The nuclear fires were still spreading, catching more vessels in their deadly embrace. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves flying into new clusters of mines. Ships that pressed forward encountered even denser fields. High Counselor Marathex watched with ancient eyes that had finally found something that surprised them. It appears, Ambassador, that the humans were expecting you. The Varathi fleet regrouped and pushed forward, but they were no longer moving with casual confidence. They were moving carefully now, using their weapons to clear paths through the minefields. It cost them time and energy, and still the mines kept exploding. From behind the moon called Europa, the human fleet emerged. 182 warships moving in perfect formation, heading straight for the wounded Varathi Armada. They were outnumbered almost 20-1. They did not hesitate. Admiral Lawson watched the engagement unfold on his display. All ships weapons free. Make every shot count. The battle for Earth had begun. The space around Earth had become a graveyard of broken ships and burning debris. The Varathi had pushed through the minefields, paying a terrible price for every kilometer gained. But they kept coming, because that was what the Varathi did. They conquered. They never retreated. They never showed weakness. Admiral Lawson watched the casualty reports scroll across his screen. Humanity had lost 63 ships in the first 6 hours, almost a third of their fleet. But the Varathi had lost over 800 vessels, and they were still dying. This was not supposed to happen. The mathematics of galactic warfare did not allow for this. A young species with primitive technology could not stand against the Varathi Dominion. Yet here they were. Commander Patricia Dunn coordinated the defensive networks from her station, her voice never wavering as she directed squadrons and ordered attacks. She had not slept in 30 hours, but she showed no signs of fatigue. There would be time for sleep when the battle was over, one way or another. Squadron 7, you are cleared for approach on the enemy flagship, she said into her communicator. All weapons are authorized. Good hunting. Captain Marcus Webb's voice came back, steady and calm. Copy that, Commander. It's been an honor serving with you. The honor is mine, Captain. Godspeed. Squadron 7 consisted of 12 strike fighters, small and fast and deadly. They had been waiting behind the rings of Saturn for 16 hours, watching the battle unfold, waiting for their moment. Their ships were loaded with antimatter charges, salvaged from industrial mining operations. Each charge could destroy a small moon. They had no intention of coming back. Marcus Webb led his squadron through the chaos of battle, weaving between burning warships and clouds of debris. His pilots followed without question. They all knew what they had signed up for. They all had families on Earth, people they loved, people they were willing to die to protect. The Varathi flagship was a massive vessel, nearly 10 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet. It sat at the heart of the enemy formation, directing the attack, coordinating the invasion. If they could destroy it, the Varathi command structure would collapse. All pilots, on my mark, Marcus said. It's been a pleasure flying with you. See you on the other side. See you on the other side, Captain. They dove into the heart of the enemy formation. Varathi point defense weapons filled the void with deadly light, but the human fighters were too fast, too unpredictable. They twisted and rolled through spaces that should have been impossible, their pilots pushing themselves and their machines beyond any reasonable limit. 3 fighters were destroyed. Then 4 more. Marcus watched his squadron die around him, but he did not slow down. He could see the flagship now, its massive hull filling his view screen. For Earth, he whispered. The remaining fighters hit the flagship at the same moment, their antimatter charges detonating in a cascade of pure annihilation. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star in the night sky. When the light faded, the Varathi flagship was gone. In the Galactic Council chamber, 400 species watched in stunned silence. The Varathi flagship had conquered 11 civilizations. It had never been seriously damaged in battle, let alone destroyed. And now it was scattered across 1 billion kilometers of empty space. destroyed by 12 tiny fighters piloted by beings who had known they were going to die. Ambassador Zeltrix stood frozen at his podium, his compound eyes fixed on the display. His mandibles opened and closed, but no sound came out. High Counselor Mirathex spoke softly. "Ambassador, it appears your fleet has suffered a significant setback." Zeltrix found his voice. "This changes nothing. We still outnumber them. We will still conquer them. This is merely a delay." But his voice lacked conviction, and everyone in the chamber could hear it. On Earth, the Varathi had begun their ground assault. Landing ships had broken through the orbital defenses and dropped troops into the major cities. New York, Tokyo, London, Beijing, they were all burning. The insectoid soldiers were fast and strong, their exoskeletons providing natural armor that human bullets struggled to penetrate. But the humans had been preparing for this. Larva Mitchell crouched behind a broken wall in what remained of downtown Chicago, a rifle pressed against her shoulder. She was 29 years old, a former elementary school teacher who had never fired a weapon before today. Now she had killed 6 Varathi soldiers, and she would kill more before the day was done. 3 of them coming up Franklin Street, said Tommy Park, the teenager hiding beside her. He was supposed to be in high school. Instead, he was spotting targets for the resistance fighters. "I see them." Lavra aimed carefully, remembering the training videos she had watched 1,000 times. Aim for the joints, where the exoskeleton is weakest. Short, controlled bursts. Never panic. She fired 3 times. 2 of the Varathi fell. The third turned toward her position, raising its weapon. Before it could fire, a Molotov cocktail sailed out from a window across the street and shattered against its head. The alien shrieked as flames engulfed its sensory organs. Lavra finished it with a single shot. "Nice throw," she called out. "Thanks," came a voice from the window. It belonged to Mrs. Chun, who was 73 years old and had told Laura she remembered hiding from soldiers during a war in her childhood. She had made 40 Molotov cocktails that morning. The resistance was not organized. It was not coordinated. It was simply every human being who could hold a weapon standing up to fight. In cities across the planet, the story was the same. For every human who fell, another took their place. For every block the Varathi captured, they lost a dozen soldiers. The aliens had expected to conquer a planet in hours. Instead, they had walked into a nightmare. Lieutenant Danny Reeves looked up from his communication console, his face pale. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Varathi. They're requesting terms." The bridge fell silent. Lawson turned slowly from the display. "Repeat that, Lieutenant." "They're requesting terms of surrender, sir. They want to negotiate." Patricia looked at the Admiral, waiting for his response. Everyone on the bridge was watching him. Lawson thought about the cities burning on Earth. He thought about the millions of people who had already died. He thought about Marcus Webb and his squadron, flying to certain death without hesitation. "Tell them we don't accept surrenders," he said quietly. "Not today. Today, they pay for what they've done." The battle continued. 48 hours after the first Varathi ship entered Earth's orbit, the invasion was over. But not in the way anyone had expected. The Varathi Dominion, rulers of 1,000 star systems for 10,000 years, had been broken. Their fleet of 3,200 warships had been reduced to less than 400 crippled vessels, fleeing toward the edge of the solar system. Their ground forces on Earth were dead, captured, or hiding in ruins, hunted by civilians who had learned to kill without mercy, and the humans were not satisfied with survival. They wanted blood. Admiral Lawson stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching the tactical display show the pursuit. His fleet had been cut in half, barely 90 ships still capable of combat operations. By every rule of warfare, he should consolidate his forces, repair his vessels, and prepare for the next attack. Instead, he was chasing the retreating enemy into the void. "Admiral," Patricia said carefully, "our ships are damaged. Our crews are exhausted. If we push too hard, we might not be able to defend Earth if they regroup and return." "They won't regroup," Lawson replied. "And they won't return. Not if we finish this." He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. It was not anger, exactly. It was something colder, something that had been born in the fires of the past 2 days. "They came to our home," he said quietly. "They burned our cities. They killed our people. And now they're running, hoping we'll be satisfied with driving them off. Hoping we'll be reasonable." He shook his head. "We're done being reasonable. We're done being prey. The galaxy needs to learn what happens when you threaten humanity." The pursuit continued. In the Galactic Council chamber, the observers watched in disbelief as the human fleet crossed the boundary of their own solar system and kept going. This was not defensive action. This was not survival. This was something that had not been seen in millennia. This was revenge. The Veluxy delegate had stopped making comments about wasteful pride. He sat in silence, his feathers flat against his body in an instinctive display of submission. The Threllian beside him had not spoken in hours. High Counselor Mirathex watched the display with an expression that might have been wonder or might have been fear. In her long existence, she had seen many species rise to challenge the established powers of the galaxy. She had never seen one do it like this. "They should be dead," whispered the Calori ambassador, the one whose species had been crushed by the Varathi centuries ago. "They should all be dead." "How are they doing this?" No one had an answer. The Varathi homeworld was called Thraxis. It was a hot, humid planet covered in vast swamps and towering hive cities. For 10,000 years, no enemy had ever reached it. The Dominion's fleets had always stopped any threat long before it could approach the sacred world of the Varathi people. 1 week after the battle for Earth, human ships appeared in orbit around Thraxis. There were only 63 of them, battered and scarred from weeks of continuous combat. They faced the home defense fleet of the Varathi. Nearly 200 ships crewed by warriors who would rather die than see their world fall. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, every Varathi defense ship was destroyed or captured. The humans had lost 11 more vessels, but they did not stop. Dropships began descending through the atmosphere, carrying troops that had learned to fight in the burning streets of Earth cities. Commander Patricia Dunn led the ground assault personally. She walked through the streets of the Varathi capital with a rifle in her hands and fire in her heart. Around her, human soldiers moved with the grim efficiency of people who had nothing left to lose. The Varathi civilians fled before them, clicking and shrieking in terror. They had never seen their own streets invaded. They had never imagined that it was possible. Patricia found the Dominion's command center without difficulty. The Varathi soldiers guarding it surrendered without a fight. They had seen what happened to those who resisted. Inside, she found the Varathi High Council, 12 ancient insects who had ruled their species for centuries. They looked at her with compound eyes that showed no understanding of what was happening. "You cannot do this," the eldest of them said through a translator. "We are the Varathi. We conquer. We are not conquered." Patricia stared at him for a long moment. She thought about Chicago, burning while she fought in the streets. She thought about her parents, who had lived in San Francisco before the orbital bombardment turned it into a crater. She thought about all the people she had known who were now dead. "You made a mistake," she said finally. "You thought we were like the other species you've conquered. You thought we would break. You thought we would submit." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We're not like them. We're not like anyone you've ever faced. We're humanity, and we don't know how to surrender." The Varathi High Council was taken prisoner. Their government collapsed. Their military, what remained of it, laid down their weapons and pleaded for mercy. Across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear of the Varathi for thousands of years watched in astonishment. The invincible empire had been shattered in less than 2 weeks. And the species that had done it was one that most of them had never even heard of before. On Earth, the survivors began the long work of rebuilding. Cities that had stood for centuries were now ruins. Millions of people were dead. Entire nations had been devastated by the orbital bombardments, but they were alive. They were free, and they had proven something to the universe that could never be taken back. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever seen, and they were just getting started. 6 months had passed since the Varathi incident, as it came to be known throughout the galaxy. In that time, the universe had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Varathi Dominion no longer existed. Their homeworld was occupied by human forces, their military disbanded, their government replaced by a council of species they had once enslaved. The empire that had ruled 1,000 star systems for 10,000 years had been erased from history in less than 3 weeks. And humanity had taken its place. Admiral Kevin Lawson stood before the Galactic Council, wearing a dress uniform that bore more medals than he cared to count. Commander Patricia Dunn stood at his right hand, her posture straight and her eyes sharp. Behind them, a delegation of human diplomats, scientists, and military officers waited in respectful silence. The chamber was full. 400 species had sent their representatives to this meeting, and every one of them was watching the humans with expressions that ranged from awe to fear to poorly hidden hostility. The air was thick with tension. High Counselor Mirathex spoke first, her crystalline form catching the light in complex patterns. Admiral Lawson, the Council has asked you here today to discuss the future relationship between humanity and the galactic community. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that have surprised us all. That's one way to put it, Lawson replied. Another way would be to say that we survived an attempted genocide and responded by removing the threat permanently. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Veluxi delegate rose from his seat, his blue feathers ruffled with agitation. Is that meant to be a threat, Admiral? Are you suggesting that humanity will destroy any species that opposes you? I'm suggesting that humanity will never again be an easy target. Lawson's voice was calm, almost gentle. We didn't start this war. We didn't want this war. We asked for nothing except to be left alone while we developed in peace. The Varathi decided that we should be slaves or corpses. They chose violence. They paid the price. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from 100 different species. Some looked away. Others held his gaze with expressions he could not read. We're not interested in conquest, he continued. We're not interested in empire. We've seen what that leads to. The Varathi spent 10,000 years building their dominion, and it all crumbled in 2 weeks because they forgot what it meant to face someone who would rather die than submit. He paused. But understand this. We remember. We remember every city that burned. We remember every family that was torn apart. We remember every child who died in our streets. And we do not forget. Patricia stepped forward, addressing the council directly. Humanity is prepared to join the galactic community as equals. We will share our knowledge. We will participate in trade and diplomacy. We will work toward peace and prosperity for all species. Her voice hardened slightly, but we will never again be vulnerable. We will never again be prey. If anyone threatens our people or our home, they will face the same fate as the Varathi. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, Mirathex spoke again. You have given us much to consider, Admiral. The Council will deliberate and provide our answer. The deliberation lasted 3 hours. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with permanent representation and voting rights equal to the oldest and most powerful species. A mutual defense treaty was signed, obligating all member species to come to each other's aid if attacked. No one expected to ever need to invoke that treaty against the humans. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Cities were rebuilt, bigger and stronger than before. Memorials were constructed for the dead. Children who had grown up during the war learned to play in streets that no longer smelled of smoke and death. Laura Mitchell stood in the center of Chicago, looking up at the new skyline. The city had been devastated during the invasion, but now it was rising again. Construction drones filled the air, building towers that reached toward the stars. She thought about her parents, who had died in Denver during the bombardment. She thought about her brother, who had survived New York by hiding in the subway tunnels for 3 days. She thought about Mrs. Chun, the 73-year-old woman who had made Molotov cocktails and fought beside her in the streets. Mrs. Chun had not survived the final battle for Chicago. Neither had Tommy Park, the teenager who had spotted targets for her. They were buried in the memorial park that now covered what had once been the downtown financial district. Laura was 30 years old now. She had gone back to teaching, working at a school that had been rebuilt on the ashes of the one where she had once worked. Her students were children who had lived through the war, who had lost parents and friends and homes. They were tough in ways that children should never have to be tough. But they were alive. They were learning. And they were growing up in a galaxy that would never again underestimate humanity. A transport ship lifted off from the spaceport on the edge of the city, carrying colonists to one of the new human settlements in former Vorethi space. There were dozens of such colonies now, established on worlds that had once belonged to the Empire, that had tried to destroy them. Humanity was spreading across the stars. Not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as survivors who had earned their place in the universe through blood and sacrifice. The Galactic Council watched them with a mixture of respect and fear. The great powers of the galaxy had ruled for millennia, secure in their strength and their numbers. Now there was something new in the cosmos, something unpredictable, something that had proven it would fight to the last breath rather than surrender. Hi. Counselor Mirathex had lived for millions of years. She had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. She had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of galaxies, but she had never seen anything quite like humanity. In her private chambers, she studied the reports from human space. Their population was recovering. Their military was expanding. Their scientists were making discoveries that surprised even the most advanced species in the Council. They had gone from a primitive species taking its first steps into the cosmos to one of the most influential powers in the galaxy in less than a year. It was unprecedented. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. She wondered what they would become in a century, in a millennium. In the vast stretches of time that lay ahead, whatever it was, she suspected that the galaxy would never be the same. On Earth, Laura Mitchell watched the transport ship disappear into the sky. She did not know what the future held. None of them did. But she knew one thing for certain. Humanity had faced the darkness between the stars and refused to be consumed by it. They had fought and bled and died, but they had not broken. And now they stood among the powers of the galaxy, not as servants or subjects, but as equals. The universe had tried to crush them. It had failed, and it would never forget it.